I want to talk about lean as a strategy and the implications of thinking about lean as a complete business system. We've been talking about operations and improving operations, often in legacy organizations and the legacy systems and legacy processes. Now I think is the time to take a bigger leap and to think about lean as a strategy. And I'll tell you what I mean. I've learned a great deal from these conferences, which is why I continue to come, about lean in IT and lean in software, and the digital age and how we're all going to be blown away by software. And I find that really exciting. I think the potential of technological opportunities from digital, I think, are huge. But I think the real challenge is not the technology. The real digital challenge is actually building organizations for the future that can actually realize the true technical potentials of the digital era. So as I say, we've been focused both in terms of applying digital technology, but also into the lean movement, on improving existing organizations, existing systems, and existing processes. And I think the big challenge, and you read it in all of the intelligent assessments of the digital age, is not the technological opportunities, it's the organizational structure of how we organize work, how do we create value for customers, and how do we organize to do that together. And there, I think, is the biggest obstacle, and the one that we have something to contribute to saying something about. And wherever you read about the introduction of new technologies, it's always the social organizational model, mindset, structures, organizations that actually is the slowest thing to change. User acceptance, yes, is also something that takes time, and you cannot force new technological opportunities on people's lives unless it actually creates additional value for them. But I think that's less of a constraint, actually, and I think the technology is less of a constraint. Most of the technological opportunities are there or are coming, and that's going to be, I think, very exciting. So I want to actually ask all of us to think a bit broader than the pieces of the lean story that we are familiar with, and see how we can actually contribute to building a vision of the organizations that we need for the next digital era, which are not yet here. Even the first generation digital companies are looking extremely traditional to me as they scale up and become very large, dominant corporations. So I don't think they've found the answer yet that we need to find as a society. So we have a lot of strands in the lean movement now. We have the lean startup, which has been tremendous at focusing us on the power of experimentation and the power of trying things without getting them perfect to start with, and trying and quickly getting feedback. I think that's a terrific bringing entrepreneurship to that initial testing out of ideas. I think it will struggle inevitably when the bureaucracy takes over to sustain that level of entrepreneurship, but I think it's extremely important. Agile, we've had a lot of the Agile founders here, and we have Jess here as another representative. I think Agile has been an extremely important additional experiment base for learning how, I don't mean this derogatorily, but learning how craftsmen can actually work together. I think of the digital experts and doctors as still being the proud possessors of their own skills, and having them not release that, but actually learning how to work together productively, I think has been a very big contribution to the Agile movement. We've had contributions from design thinking, and I think this latest Sense and Respond book is one of the best books that we've had out of that strand, which is really focusing on the whole customer, on the connection and the building a relationship with the customer that we tried to talk about many years ago in our own book, Lean Solutions. But I think now we have the technical opportunity to create a true dialogue with users and customers. And we have the lean product and process development crowd who come out of the big project management, product development management world and have a lot to tell us about how to manage big development activities at scale. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. And our own contribution, I think, is thinking about the thinking behind a business, the lean thinking, the contribution lean thinking can make, and now to a lean strategy. So we have these different perspectives, which I think are all very, very powerful, and we need to harness them together, I think, to build what I call people-centric organizations for this digital age. So that, I think, is our shared task, is actually to think that through and to experiment and to gradually build a vision of this different organizational form. The common obstacles we face in every industry that we've been reflecting on a lot after observing lots and lots of lean experiments are the separation of strategy and execution. Here, Michael Porter, he absolutely separates the two. Strategy is about which markets, which technologies, which assets, and execution is about buying best practice, basically. There's a frontier out there, you buy the best practice, and it's essentially execution. And you talk to the lean pioneers like Art Byrne, and they always say lean is the strategy. So there's a challenge there to actually bring those two together. The second, and I've been in most multinational headquarters, and I see them absolutely like bureaucracies, in which bright people are fighting PowerPoint wars to defend budgets in silos. And inherently, those systems are resistant to change. And that is a reality that we face day to day. And big multinationals suffer from that enormously. We also have financial systems that actually cannot see problems and cannot actually see the improvements that we make. So we're actually managing by the wrong sets of numbers because we're managing by line items in a budget rather than seeing the impact of physical changes on the performance of the system as a whole. So we have a big problem there. And we have a problem, and this is maybe controversial in this audience, we have a problem too of believing, because strategy and execution are separate, that in fact change happens through experts, whether they're outside experts, maybe lean experts, or internal experts, designing processes for people to operate. So managing basically compliance for those systems. So much of management is essentially compliance. And the inevitable consequence of that is pushback from the shop floor and disengaged employees. Massive disengagement from traditional organizations across the globe. Big social problem in the future that automation is not going to solve. And the belief that innovation comes from big leaps and disruption. Yes, sometimes it does. Mostly, no, it doesn't. It comes from continuous improvement of where we are today. So my observations are that there is a tremendous wasted time, effort, capital, and resources at the top of most organizations. We've been looking at the bottom for improvements in the operations. At the bottom, but not been looking at the top, because frankly, they are the people who commission us to work for them. So it's difficult for us to tell them that they're the problem. But in fact, the shop floor is a reflection of management. Whenever I walk with a manager, I'm looking at the shop floor, but I'm actually looking at the manager because his reactions or her reactions to the shop floor tell me everything I need to know about how this works. So the real big problems are the fact that our organizational systems, this organizational model, I think has reached the end of its life and is actually now the problem itself. And we need to find an alternative. And there are some interesting thoughts to think on the way to doing that about the technology. Very interesting debate that I hope you're following in detail about autonomous products, i.e. getting rid of human decision making and replacing it, or thinking of technology as human assist. And it's not as straightforward or easy as you think. And there's a very good book, Our Robots Ourselves, that I think is really well worth reading and to understand this. But Toyota's answer is very clear. And their investment is very large in artificial intelligence, but their statement is, artificial intelligence is the future, but people come first. The point of what we do is to assist people to enable them to live their lives better and societies to organize better. So that's very clear statement on the product side. On the production side, we have a very strong movement again in Germany and elsewhere to develop people-free factories versus people-centric systems. And again, long debate, interesting debates been going on for years and years and years. And again, Toyota's answer is very different to the answer you'll find in many German organizations. Toyota Global New Architecture, TNGA, is about developing simple, multi-model, flexible factories, making 4 or 5 different products in single-piece flow, no interruptions, with zero emissions, small footprint, 40% less capital cost, and 20% less cost of introduction of new models. So a very different vision of people-centric but technology-assisted factories of the future. Really smart, flexible, simple, and zero-emission factories. So again, a very clear statement that people-centric is the right way to think about these things, I believe. Toyota's strategy, of course, was always based on learning. Toyota did not buy licenses to foreign technology as the rest of the Japanese car makers did. It didn't have the capital because it was not wanting to be reliant on the bank anymore. They'd had that experience in the 30s. So they had to actually find a different way of competing in terms of the production organization. And they also had to develop new products at twice the rate of their competitors in order to learn and to improve their technical capabilities. And so they learned to develop cars in half the time and half the effort. So it was always based on learning and is still based on learning. So that tells us a very, very important pointer as to the point of a strategy. The point of the strategy is essentially learning, choosing people-centric solutions, seeing the Gemba, whether it's the user's Gemba, whether it's the product development Gemba, whether it's the production Gemba or the supply chain Gemba, seeing as the Gemba as the source of transformation, rather than seeing experts designing new solutions to impose on people. So the Gemba is the source of transformation and the source of learning that leads to cumulative dynamic gains in performance rather than focusing on the optimization of systems designed by others through compliance. And the accelerator for this learning, of course, is challenging and enabling everybody to grow and develop. So a formal structure that focuses on building capabilities and capabilities for learning. And that leads, of course, has led over the years to continuous innovation in leading technologies, where Toyota is now the leader in the hybrid technology, the technology of now, as the diesel era is coming to a close. And not completely convinced about electric, but they're already selling the technology that the industry is increasingly recognizing as the technology of the future, which is hydrogen fuel cells. And Toyota's there first. So very interesting. So we would conclude from that is that lean strategy is about solving the right problems using a different way of thinking. So it's a different way of thinking about the purpose of the business, and it's a different way of a more effective way of execution. So, observing, going back, understanding these obstacles that I've talked about. As a challenge has to go back to the pioneers that were really successful at using lean as a strategy, people like Art Byrne at Wiremold, and actually talking to a lot of the senseis and observing what senseis do that help these companies have led us to characterize the thought process in this way. The traditional thought process, bright people get together. Sometimes it turns out to be actually the opinion of the highest paid person in the room to decide on what to do. Gathering the facts, maybe going to the Gemba, but probably not. Gathering the facts and data and thinking what the smart thing we need to do to compete. And then developing a plan. And developing a plan to decide in detail what's going to be done to implement that. Classic strategy and planning. And then handing that plan off to others to execute. And driving that through traditional use of metrics, etc., etc. Driving the plan through, forcing the plan through, forcing compliance with the plan. Good change management technologies, techniques to overcome bureaucratic resistance and so on. And then finally, dealing with the consequences, the unintended consequences when things don't go according to plan. And that's the classic traditional thought process, reasoning cycle, if you like, that we're very familiar with, that we've been warned against by Kahneman and thinking about fast and slow thinking. This is classic fast thinking, fast implementation, jumping to a solution rather than experimenting and building on what exists. The alternative we characterized as follows. If we're going to be smarter about finding the right problems to solve, then we need to actually learn how to go and find those problems. In a bureaucratic organization that essentially is a negotiation on budgets across functional departments and so on, the problems by definition are hidden. And you can't see them. Top management can't see them. They think they can. They absolutely can't. So the question is, how do you find the real underlying problems that need solving? Not, I'll launch 1,000 initiatives and some of them will cover whatever the problems turn out to be. And look at most executive lists of 60 or 80 projects, and that's what you'll find. Scattergun approach. Finding the real problems and then facing those problems, saying, well, how would we measure the outcomes, the physical improvements, and how would we define the direction of improvement that we need to take in order to address those problems? Not what is the answer, what's the plan, what is the direction of improvement we need to go down, and how do we make that clear so that everybody can understand their contribution to closing those gaps. And that's about framing experiments to improve our activities, to improve the ability to go down that improvement direction that we've defined. And then framing from those experiments, forming a solution that actually works from out of multiple experiments and multiple learning. Let me just take those four in succession. As a first realization, of course, that any learning strategy actually is also a personal strategy. And unless the leaders themselves are willing to commit to a personal strategy of learning and going through this thought process themselves, then the rest of the organization doing it on their own is not going to work. So actually, it's a personal commitment and it's an organizational commitment to learning and supporting everybody. So let me just take those four. Finding the problems means actually going to the Gemba, of course, and actually for helping the Gemba solving their immediate obstacles that are preventing them doing their work. And through supporting those detailed day-by-day improvement activities, a smart leader ought to be able to see that the underlying problems that are actually causing the problems that these people are struggling with. So it's interesting that you go to the Gemba to support problem solving and also to learn yourself how to see the underlying problems. As I said before, most of the problems are actually caused by the top of the organization. And to see those and to uncover those, you can't do it unless you go to the Gemba. And in doing that, you also build up credibility and demonstrate a commitment to learn. So it's what we call leading from the ground up. So it's interesting that leaders learn by helping others to learn. That's a very common experience. That is essentially what a sensei is doing. A sensei is taking a leader to learn not only the detailed problem solving, which appears irrelevant to the big problems the leader's facing, but is actually crucial in understanding the commitment and understanding a deeper understanding of the underlying problems that they have created that are preventing the front line from doing their work. And then setting improvement directions, it's what about which physical measures will yield the desired system-level business results. It's not financial line items in the budget, it's the physical measures that will deliver the business results. And again, we've done a lot of work now to understand how to see and use financial systems to help us see the business result, the business case for lean. And interestingly, having faced the problem, having found the problem and faced the problem, actually the Toyota production system itself is key to this. We think of the Toyota production system as a collection of best practices that Toyota uses to roll out across the organization. That is completely wrong. That is absolutely not what the Toyota production system is. Maybe it's wrongly named. It should perhaps be the Toyota learning system. And it's actually a set of learning frames. It's a very powerful set of learning frames for helping people, having understood the improvement direction, understand the experiments that they could construct to improve the process. And this is the set of 5 sets of questions that you need to think about when you're in that stage of the PDCA process of actually understanding root causes and coming up with countermeasures. First, of course, is what is this going to do for the consumer's experience, the fit for purpose of your product or service? And on the right-hand side, it's how do we build in quality? How do we understand and make visible defects and interruptions to the process? How do we deepen our technical knowledge of the process? How do we separate man from machine and so on and so forth? Jidoka is all about deepening our technical knowledge of the ability of the work to be performed the right first time on time. And on the right-hand side, the just-in-time column is all about having understood and improved the ability of each process. How do we link them together? How do we create flow? How do we link things together and synchronize them step by step, which is the point of a pull system? And how do we do that in single-piece flow in line with demand so we align our capacity with demand? So it's about the deep mastery of the work on the one side, the technical knowledge of the work, and the deep mastery of the process on the left-hand side. And that's the tactical application of the knowledge. Unless that knowledge actually translates into a stable environment, a standard, do we incorporate the learning into standards? Standards as a baseline for improvement. And unless we are constantly challenging those standards through Kaizen, we're essentially trying to create an environment in which people are confident in doing their work. and providing the social basis through stable teams and a stable relationship with management, so that management ensures that the teams have all of the things they need to carry out their work every day. Set of 5 different perspectives that are interdependent. You cannot have one without the others. And also reflect not just about improving the work and the process, but in fact are talking also about a deepening of the understanding. It's not just single loop learning. How do we find a solution to this problem? It's double loop learning. How do we learn from solving that problem to solving other problems in the future? So think about this. This is terrifically powerful. This is actually the core insight behind improving any work process. And then, having done that through multiple experiments, forming solutions through repeated experiments, of course we have the chance then of capturing the reusable knowledge that we learn from those experiments. But it's very interesting, the sensei is usually not interested in your answer and your solution. The sensei is interested in what did you learn. So much more important than reusable knowledge is reusable learning. How do I learn from today's success or failure in tactically solving that problem? How do I reflect and learn about how do I approach problems in the future? That's about building capabilities. So it's not about defining a best practice and rolling out, which is a classic mistake of the previous era. It's the way Six Sigma is being deployed. This is about building capabilities. Think about it. Let's just reflect also in the product development environment how this translates into that environment and what insights we get from that environment too. Products are not a series of projects, they're actually a stream of value with a takt time. Toyota's takt time was twice as fast as everybody else. So it's about, given that takt time, what can we do for the next iteration of that product? And how do we simultaneously manage the parallel evolution of technical capabilities? And that's what's fascinating about the role of the chief engineer. The chief engineer goes out and observes the user Gemba, the producer Gemba, all the feedback from the continuous learning from the Gemba of the production sites and distribution sites and so on, and the supplier's Gemba. So he collects the feedback, if you like, and digests the feedback from the continuous improvement in all of those Gembas. He or she defines the overall product concept, what this next iteration is going to look like, but crucially, they make the judgments on the new and existing features, which problems we're going to resolve rather than improving everything. So this is actually where the economy of focusing on the right problems is absolutely critical and makes that system work. And the interesting thing is that technical departments provide the knowledge to the chief engineer, who himself has no large department reporting to him. He is the customer for the knowledge from the technical departments and the support functions. And sure, he decides the overall concept in a dialogue with the technical departments, but he makes the decision. And their job is to provide the knowledge, but also to manage the learning curves, the technical learning curves of their staff. So this, I think, also carries a very, very important, this is an important lesson for that organization of the future, is that we have a customer for the product streams that carries enormous responsibility, and the technical support activities are support activities. So IT doesn't rule, IT is the supporters. And that's hard for experts to live with, but that's the truth. IT should be embedded everywhere, and you should get out of the IT department and you should all be sitting right next to your users and customers and supporting them. But we can talk about that later. So continuous innovation in line with user needs is the key to learning faster than competition. And it's about the focus, the ability of the organization to focus on the right questions and the right problems and solve them with cumulative experience. So again, I think there are some lessons here for how we think about structuring organizations of the future and the purpose of the strategy of the organizations of the future. So this is the result, these two books are the result of an activity we've been engaged in the last 4 or 5 years. Michael Ballet and I, and Ori Fiume, the finance director of Wymold, and Jacques Chaise, who was CEO himself, went through many lean programs and then finally found a sensei. And this is the story of many, many organizations here in France that actually have, France and Italy and so on, that have actually been pursuing the strategy of doing it themselves, leading it themselves with a sensei. On the left, Michael's already published the intellectual journey we've been through over the last 4 years. A lot of shared articles, which are really, really, really powerful and worth reading. The Lean Strategy book, which embodies the case studies, the very detailed case studies and examples of this new way of thinking, that comes out at the end of May, and I hope you will enjoy reading it. So our contribution, I think, to thinking about the organization of the future is that Lean is a business system that learns to solve the right problems faster than competitors and does that with less time, less effort, less capital, and wasting less resources. So I think that's hopefully a framework for us to think about adding detail to that and creating a vision of the organization that really will enable us to use the opportunities opened up by the digital age. Very exciting stuff. Thank you very much for listening. Yeah.
Good morning. We'll open it up for questions now for Mr. Jones. Does anyone have a question to start?
The true contribution, I think, of Toyota is actually that it is pointing the way to an organization of the future. It's not perfect. It has not at all done all of the things we would think. But actually, it's very interesting that all of the pieces of the Lean story that I mentioned right at the beginning have all found inspiration in the Toyota case. So Toyota's people-centric approach actually points the way for the organizations of the future. And that's what people are intuitively recognizing. But we need to think of it as a big picture rather than simply just how do we improve the efficiency of the operations of our existing processes. Yes.
Okay, maybe being the devil's advocate a little bit. Artificial intelligence is also learning without people. So could you envisage very far into the future an organization without people that is also learning? So taking it to the extreme, of course.
I can't, but then I'm probably not going to be around by that time. You're absolutely right. It's learning with people. I think it's learning with people. I don't think an organization that is completely peopleless. I'm sure it will happen, but whether it's desirable, whether it will do the right things, is a good question. I think the point is, what is the purpose? What are we doing in trying to use artificial intelligence? Are we using it to try and develop people-free systems and substitute for people, or are we doing it to assist and enable people to do things that people are uniquely equipped to do, which is respond to change? So, look, I don't know the answer. It's a very good question, and I don't know the answer. But I think these things are not black and white. These things are a balance of getting the balance right between automation and human decision making, and that will change. So I'm not a pessimist either of thinking everybody's going to be replaced by robots. I think an awful lot of top managers could be replaced by robots. Yes.
Dan, question about moving away from an expert-centric approach to getting that learning down. You're talking to a group of IT professionals.
Yep.
Many of them have spent their career becoming an expert
Yes.
with a very, very specific application of technology.
Yes.
What you say makes sense, but I think it's also going to scare the hell out of people.
Yes. Again, this is a question of balance. At the moment, the traditional model, based on functional silos and functional expertise and specialist knowledge, basically harnesses 10-15% of the organization in thinking about designing it for the future. What we're saying here is that actually let's engage, let's be generous, say 80-90% of people in improving the work. Why aren't we harnessing that? Why aren't we harnessing that? Now, I'm not saying this gets rid of experts. It actually changes the role of experts. Experts become the people, the front line, who actually create the value, go to for help, for expert help. And when I'm sick, I go to a doctor for help. I may go to an AI database in the future to check out the symptoms before I go to a doc. Absolutely. And that's where maybe some of our experts are going to be replaced. But I think the systems have been so heavily skewed. We've thought about labor as a commodity that can be bought and sold and traded, and essentially got rid of, ideally. And that kind of mindset, I think, is a mistake, and it's politically not going to survive, I don't think. And I think is at the root cause of many of the political problems we've got today. So I don't think this is this is an opposition to experts. This is actually balancing the role of the expert versus the role of the people who actually create value. Yes. Yes.
You talked about role of top management.
Yeah.
So how to help them to see the obstacles?
Yeah. That's a very good question, and it is absolutely true that without top management seeing this, we can only go so far, and things don't last. If top management has the traditional idea of strategy and execution, they just do strategy and other people execute. I think that's hopeless, and I don't think that's going to survive. I think the only way is actually getting to top management and trying to show them examples of this different way of leading, and then leading them through a process of meeting other CEOs who've gone through this process and so on and so forth. So it's a learning process itself. That's what we're trying to do in the Lean Strategy book, is actually present all of these arguments, not theoretically as I've been doing here, but as a series of real case studies with the real detail, as we did in Lean Thinking, that a CEO can actually relate to if they read. That's a question. But I think it is possible for people who realize, leaders who realize the current system isn't working and are looking for an answer. These are not theory. These are experiences that can be documented. You can go and see. You can feel them. You can test them. You can meet the senseis and meet the leaders themselves. So it provokes them to think about personally learning and leading themselves, and building a team of leaders